"Sir, I'm going to need you to stand up. This isn't a bus station." The voice is hard, clipped and very certain of itself the way only people who have never been told they're wrong can sound. The old man in the army field jacket doesn't flinch. He simply looks up from the waiting room chair, studies the officer with the calm of someone watching the weather change, and says very quietly, "You have no idea who I am." "Do you?" Officer Blake Maxwell smiles. The thin, practiced smile of a man who believes rank is the same thing as power. "Sir, I don't need to know who you are. Get up and leave now." This is a story of an old man. In a cold November night, a waiting room packed with 43 witnesses, and not one of them said a word. What happened next would expose the rotten core of one of the city's most prestigious medical institutions, which triggered a federal shutdown in 30 minutes, and prove one unbreakable truth. The people with the most power rarely look like they have it. Stay with me. Every single detail in this story matters. The name on the bench, the letter on the floor, the flip phone, all of it matters and you don't want to miss it. Pause for a second. If you believe in justice, real, earned, bone-deep justice, hit the subscribe button right now. What you're about to watch is going to rebuild your faith in consequences. It was 6:42 p.m. on a Tuesday in November 2023 when Wayne Hargrove walked into the lobby of Hargrove Memorial Hospital for the first time in 11 months. He didn't call ahead. He never did. That was the point. Wayne was 72 years old, and he looked every single year of it. His face was weather-beaten in the way that only comes from a life actually lived, not managed, not curated, but lived. There were creases at the corners of his eyes deep enough to hide secrets in. His hands, wrapped loosely around a sealed manila envelope bearing a gold-embossed crest, were the hands of a man who had spent decades building things with them. He wore an olive army field jacket. Faded, the emblem of the 101 Airborne, still stitched with perfect precision to the left shoulder, was the only thing about him that hadn't aged. Beneath it, a plain white shirt, charcoal trousers, scuffed dress shoes that had once been expensive. He did not look like a man who owned the building he'd just walked into. That was also the point. Wayne had built Hargrove Memorial 26 years ago. He had put the first shovel in the ground himself. He had named the hospital after the name of the street his mother died on. At the point of her death, there were no hospital close enough to save her. He had funded the hospital's first wing from a debt settlement and his own veterans' benefits. And he had stood in this exact lobby. Then it was just a bare concrete and scaffolding, and he made a promise to the community that had never left his chest. This hospital will treat every human being like a human being. That was his promise. What greeted him now felt like a different planet. The waiting room was packed. Over 40 people crammed into orange plastic chairs bolted to the floor in rows like a bus terminal. The lighting was the yellowed, humming kind that made everyone look slightly ill. 3 televisions mounted to the wall played cable news at competing volumes. A child in the corner had been crying, steadily, for long enough that the people around her had stopped reacting. A man in his 50s clutched his left arm, face greased with sweat, eyes closed, waiting in silence. The intake desk had 2 staff. One was on her phone. The other was arguing with an elderly woman about whether a Medicare form had been correctly filled. Wayne stood at the entrance. He breathed it in the way a doctor takes a pulse, methodically, clinically, noting every irregularity. He noticed the chipped paint above door frame 7. An empty hand sanitizer dispenser closest to the children's area. The trauma bay door swinging open without authorization for the 3rd time in 2 minutes. He was cataloging, quietly and invisibly. What he did not notice, because men like Wayne rarely scan for threats from directions. They don't consider dangerous, was the security officer at the far end of the lobby who had been watching him for 4 minutes. Officer Blake Maxwell was 48 years old and had been on the force for 6 years. On this very day, he resumed work very late. The kind of late that creates a permanent hunger for authority, a need to establish, over and over, that you belong in the uniform you wear. He had the clipped hair and pressed bearing of a man who cared deeply about appearances. And right now, appearances told him one thing, that the old man in the army jacket was a loiterer. Maxwell walked over with the steady, deliberate step of authority being exercised. He stopped directly in front of Wayne, looked down. Sir, I'm going to need you to stand up. This isn't a bus station. Wayne looked up slowly. He had the eyes of a man who had been in actual danger, and therefore recognized with immediate precision when danger was being performed rather than genuinely felt. I'm here to see Doctor Sessman, Wayne said, calm, measured, and I'm here to see the Pope. Maxwell tilted his head toward the doors. Out, now! Wayne studied him for one long moment. Then he reached into his inner pocket and produced a folded letter. He held it toward Maxwell. Maxwell didn't take it, didn't look at it. Wayne's hand lowered. His expression didn't change. But something shifted behind his eyes, the quiet calculation of a man who has received unexpected data and is already processing its implications. All right, Wayne said softly. He stood. He picked up the manila envelope. He slid the letter back into his pocket, and he walked toward the sliding doors. Why didn't he fight back? That single question is the entire story. Hold on to it. Here's what happened in the next 90 seconds. And here's why those 90 seconds would be replayed in crisp HD on a screen in front of the entire hospital staff 47 minutes later. We're sure you are loving the story. What you have seen cannot be compared to what we will see ahead. From the consequences, the arrest, and the reward. Leave a comment saying I'm still here and also make sure to hit the subscribe button. Let's continue. Maxwell didn't let it end at the door. That was his first mistake, but not his last. As Wayne walked toward the exit, Maxwell fell into step behind him, not to escort, but to perform. There were people watching. A packed waiting room full of tired, frightened people who had been waiting for hours and hadn't had a single moment of power in their day. Maxwell was going to give himself one. He put his hand on Wayne's shoulder, not a guide, a push. Let's keep moving, friend. The word friend landed like a slap, the patronizing warmth of it. The manufactured camaraderie designed to make the target feel that any resistance would be unreasonable. Wayne stopped walking. He turned his head slightly, looked at the hand on his shoulder, then looked at Maxwell. I'd prefer you didn't do that, Wayne said, even no escalation. And I'd prefer people like you didn't wander into places they don't belong. Maxwell's voice had risen. The room had gone quiet, the particular quietness of people who have decided watching is safer than intervening. His next 4 words hung in the lobby like smoke. People like you? Not a question. Wayne noted it like a clinical finding. As Maxwell reached out to usher Wayne through the sliding doors, it happened. The folded letter, the one Wayne had tried to show, the one Maxwell had refused, fell from the jacket pocket onto the lobby floor. It landed face up. The gold-embossed seal was clearly visible. Maxwell glanced at it. He kicked it toward Wayne's feet. Pick up your trash. The doors slid open. The cold November air rushed in. Wayne bent, picked up the letter, and walked out without another word. The lobby exhaled. People looked at their phones. Tiffany at the front desk had her hand over her mouth. Elena Vasquez, 27 years old, 2 years on the job, the sharpest nurse on the evening rotation, had watched the whole thing from the corridor entrance. She didn't say anything. Not yet. But she had seen the letter, a corner of it just before it was kicked away. And what she glimpsed on that corner made her stomach drop in a way that had nothing to do with the cold air, still bleeding through the lobby doors. Because that gold embossment was not a discharge paper. It was not a Medicare notice. It was a letter of findings, authored by Wayne Hargrove, addressed to the Federal Health Oversight Board, signed by a man whose name was on the building they were all standing in. Outside in the November dark, that man sat down on a stone bench. A bench with a small brass plate on its armrest, in loving memory of Margaret Hargrove. She taught us that healing begins with dignity. He had dedicated that bench 20 years ago, the day after his wife's funeral. He had sat on it then and made the second promise of his life. That her hospital would never make anyone feel like less than a person. He sat on it now, looked at her name, then pulled out a flip phone. Who does a man like Wayne Hargrove call when his hospital has gone this wrong? The answer changes everything. Most people don't know this. Under Federal Health Authority regulations, specifically Title 42, Section 482 of the Code of Federal Regulations, any individual holding formal founder-trustee status at a federally accredited hospital retains a legal right of inspection access at all hours. Without prior notice, it's called a founder's walkthrough. And it exists precisely because the people who build hospitals from nothing tend to care more about what's happening inside them than the executives who run them. From glass offices, Maxwell didn't just kick out an old man. He violated documented federal access protections on a camera with a timestamp in a lobby full of witnesses. The uniform gave him confidence. The camera gave him consequences. While Wayne was being pushed through his own hospital's doors, Dr. Samuel Sessman was on the 4th floor doing what he did best, managing perception. Sessman was 54 years old, silver-haired, and possessed the kind of polished competence that photographs beautifully and performs magnificently in boardrooms. He wore authority the way some men wear cologne, applied liberally, refreshed often, designed to enter a room before he did. He was, by every available metric, impressive. He was also, by every available metric, a disaster. The hospital he ran, the hospital Wayne had built, was 2 signatures away from a federal compliance violation. Understaffing across 3 departments. Expired medication in 2 Ward C carts that his own staff had flagged 6 weeks ago and that he'd never addressed. Infection control protocols followed in theory, ignored in practice. A physician rotation operating at 60% since August because Sessman had frozen the hiring budget to balance the numbers ahead of the accreditation audit. He knew about all of it. He had a file. He had chosen, strategically, to address none of it, betting the auditors wouldn't dig deep enough to find what he hadn't flagged. What he didn't know, couldn't know, was that the man who'd been quietly documenting all of it for 8 months had just been physically removed from the lobby with a federal inspector's letter still. In his pocket, Sessman was reviewing the VIP suite arrangements for the senator's 4 p.m. arrival when Alina knocked. She opened the door without waiting, unusual for Alina. Sessman noticed. Dr. Sessman. I need to report an incident in the lobby. There was an elderly gentleman, he was asking to see you, and security. Sessman raised one hand. Didn't look up from his tablet. Security handles the lobby, Alina. That's what they're there for. Sir, I think you should know who. The senator arrives in 4 hours. I need you focused on that, not on, the practice smile, lobby traffic. Alina stood still for a moment. Of course, she said, and left. Sessman made a small mental note. Too much initiative, watch that, and turned back to the window. He had no idea what was coming. Here's what you need to understand about people like Sessman. His fatal flaw wasn't cruelty, it was certainty. He was so certain he had every variable accounted for, so certain his audit preparation was airtight, so certain the machine he'd built was strong enough to hold. That he had stopped being able to see the cracks. That's what makes powerful people truly dangerous, not malice. If this story is already making your blood pressure rise, good. It should hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. The next 6 chapters don't slow down. Let's continue our story. The stone bench was cold. Wayne didn't mind. He'd been colder, a lot colder. Places that made a November night in the city feel like a greenhouse. He sat with his hands folded over the manila envelope in his lap and watched the world move past the hospital entrance. An ambulance pulling away with no lights, a slow call. A cab idling by the curb, a young couple arguing in low voices near the parking structure. He watched a mother walk through the lobby doors carrying a child, maybe 3 years old, limp with fever, that particular limpness that puts a fist around your heart. He watched her approach the intake desk. He watched Tiffany, who had just witnessed an elderly man be thrown out of the building, hand the mother a number and gesture toward the wait line. 4-hour wait, the board said so. Wayne looked down at the bench, at Margaret's name, then he pulled out the flip phone. He dialed from memory 2 rings. Sarah Jenkins. Sarah. It's Wayne. A pause, not the pause of someone surprised, the pause of someone recalibrating. Sarah Jenkins, head of the Federal Health Oversight Board, had worked with Wayne Hargrove for 19 years. She knew the specific weight of his silences. Where are you? I'm sitting on the bench outside Hargrove Memorial. A beat. The security protocols here are efficient. They wouldn't let me deliver the letter. Another pause, longer. Wayne. Tell me exactly what happened. He told her, precisely, without emotion. The way he'd been trained 48 years ago to report a situation on the ground with facts, sequence, and implication. When he finished, Sarah didn't speak for 4 seconds. You said the lobby was at standing capacity with a 4-hour intake wait. Correct. Medication flags on Ward C? Still outstanding. 6 weeks. Physician rotation, 60% staffing since August. I have the schedule logs. Sarah's voice shifted. The professional warmth disappeared. What replaced it was the tone of someone activating a protocol. Wayne, I'm invoking the 30-minute emergency freeze. Wayne closed his eyes. I know, he said. I'll need you at the entrance when we arrive. I'll be on the bench, he said. Of course you will. A pause. I'm sorry they treated you that way. Wayne looked at Margaret's name. They didn't treat me anyway, Sarah. They treated the man in the old jacket. That man doesn't exist. He was a test. A long breath. The hospital failed. He hung up. Inside, Officer Maxwell was at the front desk. Laughing. The freeze has been called. The clock is running. And Maxwell has no idea the test he just failed or how loud the grating will be. I'm telling you, Tiff, the guy just got up and walked out. No fuss, no argument. Maxwell leaned against the intake desk with the easy posture of a man retelling a triumph. That's how you keep the lobby clean, firm, and fair. Tiffany stared at her computer screen. He said he was there to see Dr. Sessman, she said, carefully. They all say that. I'm here to see the doctor. I've heard every version. Tiffany said nothing. Her hand moved to the mouse. She was pulling up something in the hospital's internal registry. Maxwell kept talking. What was happening in that lobby has a clinical name. Social psychologists call it the bystander effect, the documented phenomenon where individuals in a group are less likely to intervene in a problematic situation the larger the group witnessing it. First described rigorously in 1968, it's been replicated across workplace studies, medical settings, and institutional environments. The fuller the room, the quieter the conscience. 43 people had watched Maxwell physically remove an elderly man from the building. Not one had said a word. They had all assumed someone else would. Tiffany was about to. 18 seconds after opening the founder registry, the search populated. W. Hargrove. The result loaded. Tiffany's face went absolutely still. Her hand moved away from the mouse very slowly, the way hands move when the body understands something the mind is still processing. Across the lobby, Elena Vasquez was pushing through the side exit with a spare coat folded over her arm. She had seen an old man sitting alone in the cold on a stone bench, and she was the kind of person who couldn't walk past that. She found him exactly where she expected, sitting quiet. Looking at the plaque on the bench armrest, "Sir," she held out the coat, "it's cold." Wayne looked up at her. For the first time since entering the hospital, something in his face loosened. He smiled. "Thank you, dear." He touched the arm that held the coat, a brief, warm gesture. "But don't worry about the cold out here." A tilt of the head toward the glass entrance. "The temperature in there is about to drop much lower than it is out here." Elena frowned. He held out the manila envelope, not the folded letter, but the sealed one, so she could read the embossed header on the front. She read it. Her blood ran cold, not from the November air. From the understanding, sudden, total, irreversible of exactly what she had just witnessed in that lobby. She looked at the plaque on the bench. "WH," she said quietly. "I think," Elena said, voice very steady, "that I should tell you there are medication flags on Ward C that have been open for 6 weeks. "I know," Wayne said. "And the physician rotation is 60%. Yes, how long have you known?" "Since August. I went to Sessman's office twice. Both times I was told it was being managed." "It wasn't." "No," she said. "It wasn't." Wayne nodded slowly, then he looked at her steadily. "You're going to be important in the next hour," he told her. "Stay close." Elena looked at the hospital, at the lights behind the glass. Something was coming. You could feel it the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm, the world not yet different, but about to be. 3 black SUVs are 4 minutes away. And not one person inside that building is ready for what they're carrying. Here's something organizational behavior research consistently shows. The most dangerous moment in any institution isn't when someone believes they've done something wrong. It's when they start believing it's too important to be held accountable. Sociologists call this organizational insularity, the point at which an institution's internal culture becomes so self-referential, so self-validating, that it genuinely cannot process information, contradicting its own self-image. Sessman didn't think he was running a failing hospital. He thought he was running a prestigious one with some administrative friction. Maxwell didn't think he was abusing an elderly founder. He thought he was maintaining a clean lobby. The scariest thing about institutional rot isn't the rot itself. It's how completely normal everything feels from the inside. At 7:09 p.m., exactly 27 minutes after Wayne Hargrove placed a call from a cold stone bench, the first of 3 black SUVs pulled into the ambulance bay. Not for a patient. No lights. No sirens. Just 3 dark vehicles and the quiet, deliberate precision of a system that, when finally activated, moves like a scalpel. The doors opened. 6 individuals stepped out in dark blue windbreakers bearing the Federal Health Authority insignia. 4 carried document boxes. 2 carried communication equipment. All of them moved with the unhurried certainty of people who have done this before and know exactly how it ends. They did not go to the front entrance. They went straight to the internal access panel on the ambulance bay, the same panel Wayne had installed during the hospital's original construction, and entered a code. The doors opened from the inside. Sarah Jenkins came last. She was 51, sharply assembled, and carried herself with the kind of quiet authority that doesn't announce itself. She paused at the door, looked toward the stone bench near the front entrance, gave a small nod, and walked in. In the lobby, the first indication came from the sound. Not shouting, not alarms. Silence, the kind that spreads through a space like dye in water. One of the agents appeared at the far corridor door, held up a badge. By order of the Federal Health Authority, all non-emergency operations are suspended, effective immediately. All non-essential personnel are to remain in place pending identification. This facility is under federal administrative review. Tiffany dropped her phone. Maxwell straightened up from the desk. On the 4th floor, Sessman's tablet buzzed with a red banner system message he had never seen before. Federal hold, administrative freeze in effect. He read it 3 times. Then he was moving. He came down the main stairwell faster than any administrator should move through a lobby full of patients. He burst through the stairwell door into a lobby that had gone from chaotic to crystalline. Every person still. Every eye on either the agents or the screens the agents were accessing. "There's a mistake here." Sessman's voice was executive smooth even now. "I was expecting a letter of approval today, a reaccreditation confirmation." "This," he gestured at the room, "this is a misunderstanding." Sarah Jenkins stepped forward. "Dr. Sessman, my name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm the director of the Federal Health Oversight Board. We received a formal complaint supported by documented evidence. Systemic patient welfare violations, unauthorized restriction of a founding trustee, and at least 3 outstanding regulatory flags." A pause. "You were expecting a letter? You'll receive one," Sarah said, "in about 4 hours. The security footage terminal was already queued. And somewhere near the hospital entrance, Wayne Hargrove was standing up from the stone bench, straightening his field jacket and walking back toward the sliding doors. "Stay with me. Because what happens next is exactly what justice is supposed to look like." The lobby monitor was a 65-inch display screen mounted near the intake desk, normally used for wait time management. At 7:21 p.m., it showed something different. The timestamp read, 19:04:17, lobby camera 3. The room, 31 staff, 6 federal agents, 2 administrators. And a lobby half full of patients who hadn't gone anywhere, because nobody had told them to, watched the screen together in the kind of silence that is wait. They watched Wayne Hargrove walk through the front doors at 6:42 p.m. They watched him select a chair. They watched his quiet, systematic observation of the lobby, the practiced assessment of someone who knew every corner of the space. They watched Maxwell approach. They heard cleanly, on the lobby audio that nobody had thought to consider when making their choices that evening. "This isn't a bus station. People like you, pick up your trash." They watched the hand on the shoulder. They watched the letter kicked across the floor. They watched Wayne walk out. The footage ended. The silence lasted approximately 4 seconds. Then it was replaced by something that wasn't quite sound, more like the collective exhalation of 30 people recalibrating their understanding of what they had participated in, witnessed, or failed to prevent. Sarah Jenkins turned to Maxwell. Maxwell was standing near the wall. His face had gone a shade of gray that had no place on a living person. His jaw worked very slightly. The way jaws work when the brain is desperately manufacturing something to say and coming up empty. "Officer," Sarah said, her voice carrying the specific clinical quiet of someone who doesn't need to raise it. "Your supervisor has been contacted. You're to surrender your facility access credentials and remain in the lobby pending a formal debrief." Maxwell's mouth opened, closed. Dr. Sessman was not looking at Maxwell. He was looking at the frozen image on the screen, the last frame of the footage. Wayne Hargrove's back, the sliding doors closing behind him, the lobby full of people who hadn't intervened. He was looking at it with the specific, devastating expression of a man who has just understood, all at once, every mistake he made and exactly how they connect. Elena stood near the corridor entrance. She had come inside when the vehicles arrived, just as Wayne had told her to. She was watching Sessman. And Sessman, for the first time in a very long time, had nothing to manage. The lobby doors slid open. He's coming back in. And this time the whole room knows exactly who they're looking at. He walked in differently this time. Not with the careful, observational patience of a man reading a room. Not with the quiet restraint of someone choosing not to use the power available to them. Wayne Hargrove walked in the way a man walks into a space that belongs to him. Not with arrogance, with ownership. With the particular straightness of a spine that has carried weight for a very long time and has decided tonight to let it show. The packed lobby parted slightly, instinctively, the way people part for something that doesn't announce its presence but doesn't need to. He walked to the center of the room. He looked at Sessman. He looked at Maxwell. He looked at Tiffany, still at her desk, hands folded. He looked at Elena, standing straight near the wall. He looked at the mother with the feverish child, still in her orange plastic chair, watching. Then he looked at Sarah Jenkins. "Dr. Sessman. How long have the medication flags on Ward C been outstanding?" "There were some delays in the—" "6 weeks, Wayne said, not loud, not harsh, like a fact placed on a table. Sessman said nothing. Wayne turned to Maxwell. Maxwell, to his credit, or perhaps from some last, desperate instinct toward dignity, didn't look away. "Sir," Maxwell said, his voice rough. I was following the hospital's clean lobby policy. I didn't know who—" "That's the point," Wayne said. Maxwell stopped. Wayne stepped closer, not threatening, deliberate. "A hospital isn't a building, officer. It isn't a lobby that needs to look presentable for a senator. It isn't a reaccreditation score. It's a promise. The promise is, when you walk through these doors, you will be treated like a human being, regardless of your jacket, regardless of your face. Regardless of whether you look like the kind of person the people behind the desk think deserves care." A beat. Wayne turned briefly to look at the room, at every face watching him. "You broke that promise. You broke it in front of 43 people, and not one of them stopped you. And that is the most expensive kind of institutional failure there is. Because it doesn't show up in a compliance report, it shows up in the people who stop coming." Maxwell's jaw was tight. His eyes were wet. He didn't speak. "This hospital doesn't need a guard who treats the vulnerable like trash," Wayne said. He let it land. He didn't soften it. "It never did." Sarah stepped forward, addressing Sessman directly with the clean, precise language of institutional consequence. "Dr. Sessman, your operating license is under review pending findings on staffing violations, medication management failure, and unauthorized access restriction. The facility will remain under administrative hold for a minimum of 48 hours. You'll receive formal documentation within the hour." A pause. "I'd recommend contacting legal counsel." Sessman looked at the floor. He opened his mouth. He closed it. There was nothing left to manage. "If you've made it this far, you already know. This story isn't just about one hospital or one night. It's about every institution that stopped believing it could be held accountable. Make sure you subscribe and share this right now. Someone in your life needs to see what real consequences look like." The hospital was quiet. Not the quietness of vacancy. Patients were still being seen. Emergency operations still running. The building still breathing the way a hospital has to. But the administrative calmness was total. No senator in the VIP suite. No polished presentations. No performance of competence for external consumption. Just the work. Just what the building was built for. At 9:44 p.m., as the administrative hold settled into its second hour, 3 things happened in sequence. The first, Officer Blake Maxwell was escorted through the lobby by a man in a precinct captain's uniform, a man who had known Maxwell's entire career and who now wore an expression of exhausted, private grief. They didn't speak. In the lobby in front of the remaining staff and the watching agents, the captain reached over and removed Maxwell's facility access badge. Maxwell didn't resist. He didn't argue. He looked straight ahead, and if there was any dignity left in the gesture, it was in the fact that he didn't cry until after the doors closed behind him. Whether that was real regret or the performance of it, only Maxwell would ever know, but the badge was gone. The second, Dr. Sessman in the second-floor conference room was on the phone with his lawyer. The conversation was the kind that ends careers, not with an explosion, but with the slow, grinding math of accountability. The regulatory violations alone were enough for a license review. The camera footage, the unauthorized restriction of federal inspector-level access, added a civil liability dimension that no amount of boardroom polish was going to smooth. Sessman sat in the conference room and looked at the ceiling. He thought about every report he'd deferred, every flag he'd kicked down the road. Every time someone like Alina had knocked on his door and he had not looked up from his tablet. He thought about the mother with the feverish child, still in her orange plastic chair at hour 4. He thought about the man in the worn army jacket who had built the building he'd spent 8 years hollowing out. He didn't cry. Men like Sessman don't cry easily. But something behind his eyes went out. The third, Wayne Hargrove, sat back down on the stone bench outside. The November air was the same. The brass plate with Margaret's name was the same. The bench was the same, but Alina sat beside him now. He had the manila envelope open in his lap. He'd already handed the primary documentation to Sarah. But he had other papers, fresh ones, that he had been carrying for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment. He turned to Alina. "I've been watching this hospital since the board last changed," he said. "I've been watching what it became." He looked at the envelope. "What I need to finish what I started here isn't another administrator." Alina looked at him. "I'm a nurse," she said. "I know." He held out a pen. "Nurses know where the gaps are. Nurses know the difference between a protocol that works and one that just looks good on a chart." He held her gaze. "The Board of Trustees is being reconstituted starting tomorrow morning. I need someone at that table who was on the floor tonight." Alina didn't move for a long moment. Then she took the pen. It was not, in the end, a dramatic gesture. There were no cameras on it, no audience, no moment of theatrical justice. Just a woman taking a pen from an old man on a cold bench beneath the name of the woman who'd made the whole building possible. But here is what that moment was: a restoration. Not a reversal of fortune. Those are for stories that want you to feel satisfied and walk away. This was something quieter and harder and more important than that. This was the acknowledgement that the damage done by people who treat institutions like machines, who treat human beings like liabilities, who trade the promise of a place for the performance of it, that damage doesn't fix itself when the bad actors leave. It fixes itself when the people who still believe in the promise step forward to hold it. Wayne Hargrove had built a hospital for his mother's street. He had named it for the woman who taught him what healing required. And tonight, after being kicked out of his own lobby, after being called trash, after sitting alone in the cold on a bench no one had recognized, he was beginning again. The hospital lights burned through the glass behind them. Warm, working. For the first time in a long time, clean. Here's what this story is actually about. It isn't about a bad cop and a corrupt administrator getting what they deserve, though they did. It's about the invisible weight carried by the people who build things for other people and ask for nothing in return. It's about the danger of any uniform that mistakes authority for permission to dehumanize. It's about the specific cruelty of institutions that protect their image at the expense of their purpose. And it's about this one thing above everything else. Power doesn't always announce itself. The man in the worn jacket might have built the building you're standing in. The elderly woman at the back of the line might be the reason the line exists at all. The person you dismiss might be the only one in the room still holding the original promise. You never know. Which is exactly why you treat every single person with dignity. Every single one. Wayne Hargrove didn't need a gold-embossed letter or a founding trustee title to deserve basic human respect. He needed nothing more than the fact that he was a person who walked through a door. The rest was just the universe making sure the right people were watching.